Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. What is up, peeps? Plant people in
Somebody
the house.
has holiday spirit.
Hello.
Hello.
I have my Christmas tree is glowing behind me.
I know. It looks so nice behind
It
you.
is a festive glow, very festive. We can see that on the video feed.
It's the earliest I've ever had it up, and I'm really proud of myself.
Do what? So. Whoa, wait a minute. What? It's the earliest you've ever had it up, and it's December the 10th. I mean, I'm not judging.
I mean, it's been up for like a week.
Okay.
But it's not that I don't want to put it up early. It's that I don't manage to put it up until like the week of Christmas.
Right, you're getting a look behind
2 days
the curtain
before.
How far ahead we record.
Yeah. I know. I dated ourselves.
Uh-oh. Right. Well, then how early do you put your tree up?
As this may or may not be relevant, dear listeners. If it's after Christmas, we're sorry. I don't think that it will be. But I don't know. It's having an 11-year-old. It's whenever the mood hits him. Dictate, because when he has excitement, we have excitement. And this year it was the day after Thanksgiving. And the year before it was like December 5th or 7th, somewhere in Alexis
Thanksgiving
time.
Was late this year though. So I feel like
that's what everybody said. I never noticed that. So yeah, maybe that's what it was.
We always do the day after Thanksgiving.
Do you? Yeah. I mean, we do it fairly. I thought we did it fairly early, but there's a couple in my office that give me a hard time because they say that, that's so early. And I'm like, 94.5 is playing Christmas music here in Central Kentucky, so it's not
on
really
November
early.
1st. They're playing
day after Halloween.
Yeah. Yes, welcome Mariah into our hearts and minds.
Ours goes up when my children have peer pressured their dad enough to finally go out and pick up our tree, since we do like a live one
you guys do
every
a live
year.
tree, so
we do. We finally
how does
have
that work
up.
with you can't. I mean, that'd be a little tough if you put yours up like super early, wouldn't it? If you had a live tree?
I mean, just making sure keep it well watered and not like 1,000 degrees in the house, and it'll last the whole season. Yeah. So we finally have it up, and with my kiddos and their ages right now, I let them decorate. I was not OCD. I did not move things around, but I did. Like the top of our tree is all like special ornaments and breakable. And then there's kind of like a lull in the middle. And then everything on the bottom is like, if it falls off, surely it's going to be okay. Or if it gets pulled off,
that's like it'll survive. Expensive party up top, cheap seats on the bottom.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. I remember there was a time when we had to do that for Reed when he was a little bit younger. It was like lots of ornaments, then no ornaments at all where he could reach. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I get that.
Just naked for like the bottom.
Yeah, pretty much. It was just
or
garland.
Do you have a cat?
Yeah, the cat will get up in there regardless and try to eat the greenery. I don't get that. I mean, artificial greenery, you'd think cats would have better sensibilities about them, but no.
Mine just plays in the water. She's always liked water, and she will get in the Christmas tree water.
It's
the dog won't,
vitamin
but the cat
C,
does.
like maybe the yummy vitamin C taste in the water. I don't know.
Pine water taste.
Are you all stockingers?
Yes.
We are. Yeah. We are a stocking family. We are.
Yes,
and, we usually do. We wear socks, so So
hopefully you have big feet. That means big gifts. So I'm just word to the wise, Brad. So
that's what I've heard that about big feet. Yeah, big feet.
Yeah.
Big
do you
gifts.
all have Did you grow up with like super personalized stockings, or were they like just like uniform because they looked nice or were easy to find?
We were the pre-purchased. Webbed stocking. By webbed, I mean like the little red ventilated stockings that had, we were just talking about this, the fruit and nuts and the traditional like tangerines in there, Brazil nuts and things like that, which is like way far removed from that. We do individual stockings now as a family, and we may spend a little bit too much money on the stockings. I mean, like we go a little crazy because it's fun. I think stockings are fun around our house now, but yeah, growing up, we did not. We just had like the little, basic stockings, and we were just talking.
Can you recap the things that you said were in the stocking?
As far as the traditional,
the OG one, the OG one, yeah.
That was, and they were not personalized. We would just buy them as is, but there would be mostly fruit and nuts in there with some hard candy.
Yeah, the hard
probably
candy.
At least 75-80% like fruit in there, like usually a banana, sometimes a banana, but a tangerine, and then a mixture of like all kinds of nuts, like a whole walnuts.
Yeah, I
That
was
you
gonna
had to
say
crack
in the
yourself.
shell,
Yeah.
in the shell
In the
still.
shell, yeah. The Brazil nuts in the shell, and there's various and sundry other things in there. But I haven't seen stockings like that in a long, long time. I don't know
I
why.
haven't either. Now that you
How'd you
mention it,
crack them? How'd you crack them?
Everybody had nutcrackers around the house. In fact, we had a special nut cracking bowl that had the little two drilled holes that held the little metal nutcracker. And
yeah.
then I loved, and let me tell you, that's, I could crack me some nuts back in the day. I could be fast cracking walnuts, and it was a point of pride
The
to crack a
savant.
walnut. Yes, a walnut savant. Yes. But we would crack the walnuts, and to get a whole half out without cracking, yeah, that was a point of
Did you
pride
have
at my
like the little
house.
pick? Where you
Yeah,
could
that's
Yes,
what I was thinking
the
of, the
little
little
nut pick.
tools.
Yeah, the tools depending on the type of nut, it requires the proper tool. Yeah, I'm
Now
glad
I'm
you
gonna
guys
have to see.
understand this.
I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, I see if my parents still have theirs at their house. Now I'm gonna like go
Mm.
over there and ask where that is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had a regular nut bowl. Did you have anything like that, Brett? Or
I was just gonna say, I feel like if we have any Gen Z listeners, they're like, "What are you
what
talking
is
We're
about?"
he?
so old.
No, go to TikTok and under the 80s page, you will see that that's popular now. The stockings is a trending item.
Okay,
You can even
it's
buy
back,
them now.
baby.
Yeah, it's back in the TikTok shop.
All things are new again. You see.
They are.
Did
Just give
you
it
all do
time.
stockings first or last on Christmas morning?
First, probably a week or so beforehand, we would,
Oh.
Oh.
and if you went to like a little church or whatever, it wasn't unusual to get a little stocking at church. Stockings just came in all forms, really, depending on what organizations you were with, and what was going on at school. And that was the season of bake sales. I have fond memories of like Rice Krispie cakes in all shapes and sizes. But yeah, the stockings were. Yeah, they were not like a stocking that you would feel. We usually got the pre-filled stockings, but
Oh,
now
okay.
Yeah.
we do the personalized. We have them all hung by the by
Chimney
the
with
Fire with
care.
care.
yeah,
There.
by the
Yep.
chimney.
Oh.
It's the electric fireplace with care is exactly what it is. We don't have a real fireplace now. I'm kind of sad about that, but and we just refreshed the stockings this year. My wife finally found some hand knitted ones that are
Cool.
personalized, and she's very specific about her stockings. They have to meet a certain aesthetic. Okay, yeah.
Ah.
So she loves the stockings too, and even our pets have a stocking at our house. We're pretty serious about it. So
Well, I'll be the wild card. So we actually did stockings for St. Nicholas Day, which is December 6th.
Oh.
So fully separate, but we did there would always be a tangerine in the toe of the
oh,
stocking, and then some
nice.
like small toys and candy, and but yeah,
Peppermint
we always
sticks,
did
yeah.
it
Is that a
early.
family tradition, Brad, or where did that come
It
from? St.
was,
Nicholas Day.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up Catholic, a
Hmm.
lot of saint worship going on in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so the it was always, I think it was a way for all of us, including my parents and aunts, and to like stretch out the holiday fun a little bit more
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
a wider range of time.
And were these were not pre-made? These were filled individually, kind of
They
thing,
were,
Brett?
yeah, they were retained each year. The stocking would be collected and put away in storage, and then brought out and refilled with some, mixture of items. And it would be, I mean, obviously it was really nice and put together. It wouldn't be like anything super expensive in there. So it would be like little games, those games where you move around the puzzle pieces to try to,
Yeah.
or maybe like a paper airplane kit or something like that, or
Yeah.
one of those wooden
Yeah.
airplane kits or something like that. But and then candy, and there would be some in shell nuts in there as well. It's funny how those traditions kind of filter through and get
Mhm.
disseminated in different ways. But yeah, I guess the tangerine was like probably from an era where that was like the one time of year that citrus was available in. I'm guessing these traditions probably came from either started in the US or came from Europe, that it was like this kind of special, wow, citrus. This is crazy.
Yeah. Back before we took for
It was a
granted like the modern day
splurge.
shipping.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that, where it'd be kinda cool, but yeah, that's kind of a cool tradition. The in-the-hole nuts, I mean, I hadn't thought about that in years, but, yeah, that used to be much more commonplace, and almost every aunt and uncle we would visit during the Christmas season would have one of those nutcracker bowl things
Well,
out.
you need to see if cracking walnuts is like riding a bike. See if it just comes right back to you,
I
or
mean, I would be a little sad now if I couldn't take 2 walnuts in my hand and squeeze them at just the right amount of pressure and crack and get whole halves out of
oh
there.
my
I mean, I
gosh,
used to be able to do
He
that,
Wow.
as a
doesn't
kid,
need the
and
tool.
yeah,
His
now
hand.
I would need a little assistance now, I'm afraid, and it would hurt me a little bit if that was the case. But yeah, Brett,
wow.
I do need to see if it's a skill that my hand has remembered, so.
Have you guys ever seen me tear an apple in half?
Mm.
No.
No, I've
No.
Okay,
not.
well you can do it.
Okay.
It can be done. Just FYI,
I
have to
wanna
get one.
see
So he
this.
says.
This
So
will
he says.
I will bring an apple with me the next time
This'll
I
be
see
the
you in
podcast
person.
that we do add video
Perfect.
to the audio will be
Yeah, maybe
Brett.
next week we get this for the social media.
Yes,
Do you
this will
guys
be
have
the
any? You
social
guys
feed.
have any feats of strength or will that you guys perform at all?
Feats of strength or will.
Are we talking about
No pressure.
Festivus now? We've
No
gone through
pressure.
that.
You know.
The Festivus for the rest of us.
Yep.
Mm.
That's such a good one, a Festivus for the rest of us.
Brett
Maybe
did
we
not
Yeah,
should
throw a
that's
do
good.
softball with that
an
one.
episode in the future of like the Festivus of plant
Of
world.
airing our grievances towards
Airing our
certain
grievances with
plants.
horticulture.
This special Krampus episode brought to you by.
Well, today we are talking about something indoors, since it is cold for a good portion of the US. It certainly is for us, but we're talking about dish gardens and terrariums. And yes, they are different, despite the fact that people will use them interchangeably. So
Very much so.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen that a lot, but they are technically different. Jessica, would you like to explain a dish garden?
Sure. There's lots of confusion that comes along with these, as Alexis has already mentioned, because I know Ray and I have experienced this over the years at the Kentucky State Fair,
Yes,
where dish
it's always
gardens
the
is
fair.
a huge category. There are
Yes,
probably
very
close
popular.
over 50 or more that are
Mhm.
entered. But a dish garden is where you're growing most likely plants that are going to stay inside a lot of times when we think about them. But they're going to be planted in a shallow dish that does not have a drainage hole or a lid. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm not real strict on the drainage hole, even though traditionally, I think years and years ago that used to actually be somewheres in there. But now I'm not as strict about the drainage hole because it's common for dish gardens to have those, which is fine because the plants may actually stand a better chance if you overwater just a
Yes,
little
they'll
bit.
have a better chance of survival
Yeah,
with a drainage hole.
and I think
Jessica, have you relaxed your policies on drainage holes?
Have I? Yeah. Well, yes, those are the state fair rules, right?
Okay. So drainage hole and it does not comply. Is that what you're saying? If it
It's
has one?
not for the state fair wise, they
Mm.
say that is like not a dish garden if it has
Oof.
one
yeah,
for the 4-H like rules. But I
yeah,
think sometimes we go either way for it, right? Depending on if it's like a really nice dish garden with healthy plants and everything else is like 100% in that little dish garden, we can, overlook that. And that's probably
it's
why they're
interesting.
healthy because
I
they're
was
not
looking
drowning.
Yeah, that's probably why, and I was looking up some information just to kind of brush up because to get it straight in my mind. I know we look at a bunch of those every year, but the first thing that comes up when I was doing the search was like county fair rules and then state fair rules differentiating a dish garden, exactly what Jessica's telling you, differentiating a dish garden with a terrarium because the
Mhm.
two, I guess, Jessica, they're not the same, are they?
No, they're not. And that terrarium, that's what we think of like when you see those containers with the lids on them. And so those are going to be a more moist, humid, environment, a little microclimate that you're having inside those containers, versus we see more, I would say, like arid plants,
Mhm.
right? In those dish gardens, you're going to have like more of your ferns and things in those terrarium
So
settings.
think dish garden is open environment
Hmm.
and terrarium is closed environment. So in
Are both of
theory,
those
Mhm.
fair, like state fair categories? Like
Yes.
is that
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
what we're basing this on? Is
And they're
both of them are
differentiated. Yeah.
There are two different categories. When you go to the fair, you'll be able to see one or the other. And
right. And sometimes they accidentally get entered in,
Myth, they
dish
get
gardens
mixed up.
get entered in terrariums and vice versa. So we always try to place them in the correct category to the best that we can, right? Depending on their vessel they are brought in.
Yeah, if you don't think a lot about it, it's easy to exchange one concept for the other because people are thinking a container with smaller type plants, even though a terrarium can have larger plants that you just prune more often. But and I hear the terms a lot of times with youth projects used interchangeably. So we try to stress that up front because, if you're into youth development projects, specifically 4-H in our case that we work with in Extension, we try to differentiate that as we're establishing like project days or working with youth. If we have a chance to work with youth and say, this is a dish garden, the qualifications, and this is the qualifications for a terrarium, be very explicit about that because like Jessica said, the two are very, very different. And with these two projects in particular, it's probably good, Jessica. I know when we see those in Alexis, you looked at a lot of those too when you were a field agent. It's pretty obvious when you see these projects that were just put together like the week before. And you can see which ones the plants are well established. I mean, it's pretty easy. I know, Jessica, you look at more of that, and some of the others at State Fair look at more of that particular section than I do. But it's pretty obvious when you bring those in, and we all look at them. We're taking entries, and we're like, oh, you can just kind of pick it up, kind of look over it, and tell which ones are well established. My point here being, start well in advance and give your plants in the dish garden or terrarium time to get established, and you'll have a much better display if you're into displaying and going into things like 4-H contests with these things.
Yeah, we've seen all types, and like Ray said, like very easily, when you can tell when plants have just kind of been stuck in there, because we've had some some cactus fall out of dish gardens before and Velcro themselves to the carpet. So
and they smell real bad because they've been sitting in water.
Yes, and we've seen cactuses in terrariums, and we've watched them kind of melt
disintegrate
over
a week
of fair. So
we do both, and depending on, and we shouldn't like to lean too heavily on contest, but just speaking in real general terms, like if you're just, at home and you're interested in dish gardens and terrariums, I don't know. I don't have as much experience with terrariums for one reason. I don't have a lot of patience sometimes. And it always seems like when I've tried to do terrariums in the past, they take more time to get settled in, to get the environment going. And they call it a rain cycle. If it's truly a closed terrarium, it'll develop an environmental cycle of moisture recycling inside of that unit. But I would get to the point where the glass would start to fog up, which is completely normal when you first started a terrarium. I'd get to that point, get frustrated, and then lose interest and go do something else. But I think the history of terrariums, Dr. Ward, like when these things first came about, it was on accident. They were actually doing something with an insect project, and I wish I'd have looked that up. But this person that came up with the concept of a closed plant system, a terrarium, was actually some kind of moth project. But there was a fern that had germinated, and he'd tried to grow these ferns for years, and they did fantastic in this closed system. And that's sort of the story of how terrariums got started, because it was a humid environment. It was in England, I think. And this person was, observing some insect life cycles. And here comes these beautiful plants he's been trying to grow in this totally closed system that started to grow and do well. And that's sort of how they got started. But to me, terrariums take a little bit more patience, a little bit more care for plant selection, especially if you're not using like a wide open container. Because I've seen terrariums, you guys, chime in here, but in all sorts of containers. And it amazes me, some of these large containers with tiny openings. How does that even, it's amazing to me. I'm going to have to watch some videos.
It almost makes you think of like the pirate ship in the bottle, like kind of thing. Like when you think like about how they build that with some of those, like you're describing, like how did they, with their little chopstick tools, how did they get those plants in there, right? And plant it perfectly and then maintain it. And
they have to have specialized tools. And I've seen like wire loop tools at, large like nursery supply houses and stuff, the bigger ones. And I'm like, what is that? And I got to looking, it was terrarium plant placement wire loop tools. I'm like, wow. But it's for gently, putting plants into place in these large clear containers, which it needs to be a clear container. That's pretty obvious. Let sunlight in. But these large containers with tiny openings, that's just one of the, I guess, points of pride for people that love to work with terrariums. Is their specialized tools. So it does take a little bit more patience, I think. And of course, dish gardens and terrariums take careful choice of plants and soil medium and all the stuff we're going to talk about. So
I've had terrariums. I've not done dish gardens.
What kind of terrarium, like what kind of container? I'm really super interested, like in all the containers people use.
Yeah, I've done a couple of different ones. The one I had that lived the longest, and it would still be alive, but I got annoyed with it, and I had one plant species that took over. But I had it for several years, and it was in an old aquarium that had like a fully glass lid top that I could put on it, and it was probably one of the more successful ones as far as long term. And I think one of the biggest things I found making terrariums, used to do them a lot with the horticulture club at UK. So when I was in that in undergrad, we would make terrariums. And one of the things I learned was, I think a lot of people just want to put any old, usually they're tropical plants in a terrarium, and they're tropical because you're basically recreating like a jungle type environment in there with the humidity, and it's indoor, it's kept warm. So they want to put any old plant in there, but actually the most successful terrariums are usually ones, and the smaller ones, let's put it that way, like something, a milk jug or smaller. The most successful plants are actually like mini plants. They're dwarf. So they might still be a nice ivy or a fern, but they are a dwarf of that. And so and that keeps things from going rampant and taking over your terrarium, which is what
I've had that trouble too, Alexis, and to come to find out, people have, if they're using a plant like a English ivy, I'm like, how in the world do you have like that dwarf, St. Francis English ivy in a terrarium? We'll come to find out they're actually working it a lot and pruning it almost with bonsai type principles. And they're just constantly clipping back. I mean, it's amazing to me that it's that amount of work went into it. But now your terrarium, did you water that very often? The one
No, I think I probably watered it because there was some, cracks around the, it wasn't a complete seal, even though it had a lid. So it did, air out eventually. But I probably watered it maybe 4 times a year. So really, really rare that I went in there and did that. And
you didn't have to worry about air exchange or anything because it had some cracks to get natural air.
Yeah, it had a little bit of ventilation, just tiny little holes in the corners and stuff.
What about light for terrariums? Because that's something like I've done a dish garden before, but I haven't really done a terrarium. And I think, if it's, you're putting it in full sun, right? Like what
it can be dangerous.
You're cooking things, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's a great point, Jessica.
Your plants are the ants in the under the magnifying glass. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're using, especially if you're using a terrarium, a lot of people think fern, right? When they go to terrarium. Well, fern is tends to be a lower light plant. So as long as you can put it in a room where, I always say, if you can like read a newspaper or read a book for majority hours of the day, then it's probably a good spot. We might call it like a full light, full sun area for a house plant. It doesn't necessarily have to be like right in a window, unless that window is maybe north facing or something like that, where it's not getting a ton of light exposure. So that's an option as well. And I think also coming from experience stocking plants, people tend to want to pack a lot of plants in a terrarium. Number one, just like with any plant, whether it's outside and it's a tree or a flower bed or whatever, you need to think about the overall size of that, how big you want it to get. If you're going to do what Ray says and you're going to continually clip it back and you're going to keep it really small, then that's fine. But if you want something that's a little bit more hands off and you're going to let this grow, you don't want to put too many plants in there. And I think some of the most successful ones are all similar species, and very few plants, I think, are some of the more successful long-lived terrariums. Is 1 or 2 ferns and that's it type situation.
Yeah, I think my very first terrarium, I actually used a native plant. It's what we call the common name is Indian strawberry, but it was one of those that someone at school said, "Oh yeah, you can use that. It works well in terrariums," and it did work well. It was a medium to low light plant, and they stressed, which what you guys are saying makes perfect sense now. I'd never thought about it that way, but if you put like a glass, fish tank in front of a strong light, direct light source, it's going to just fry everything. But I've noticed on all of my terrarium plant list, and there's some excellent guides out there in extension, and we'll post some of those resources in the show notes. But all of the ones that are suitable for terrariums, I've noticed over the years, they're all low to medium light plants.
Mm-hmm.
There's no plants that take like a lot of light that's recommended for both terrariums that I've seen and dish gardens. The plants that take a lot of direct sunlight are the ones reserved for dish gardens.
That's a good point. Yeah, right. That's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, it's completely opposite then when you look at dish gardens, because that's going to be a lot of the succulents that you see. And everybody, like for a while, I don't know if it's still a thing, but like Pinterest and everything would be like, place your succulents like in your bathroom, place them like in the middle of your
No.
house. And those things need a lot of light. Like think about like where they grow naturally, like where they're happy at. They like a lot of sunlight. So I know people
Mhm.
who are like I have a dish garden on my desk back here and it's like the plants are kind of stretched out. It's
Kind
still
of.
thriving. Yeah. Kind of. Alexis, don't give me away.
They're
But
perfect,
That was
Alexis.
they're perfect.
so much shade just thrown in that
Literally, well
About
played,
two
Brent.
dish
syllables.
garden.
Well
Kind
played. Shade
of.
thrown. Yeah, kind of. Wow.
I
Stop,
love
stop,
Anyways,
she's already
I've never seen cacti in the shape that Jessica like as far as like physically like the shape they
it
create
is
because
it is my example to people. It's
it's
my
beautiful.
teaching
It's
moment
called
of like
exfoliation,
this
You meant
Alexis.
cute
to do that.
little this cute little like cacti like that was all short and squat when you got it. If you do not provide supplemental lighting in the winter,
It
this
will
is
go
what yours
find
could
it.
look like.
I found it hard
It
to
will
grow those. I mean, without like a grow light. Now I have some under
right.
small grow lights because
Mhm.
they want to stretch so much, like the echeverias and all that. They want to like the bottom leaves naturally drop off, and then they get leggy or they stretch. The cactus stretch it, but now it's grow lights for that 12-hour cycle, and they do. It's amazing how they've responded, and because I was like you. Uh, Jessica, what you're saying is everything was stretching out, and I had a nice window that got a lot of sunlight,
Mhm.
but it was crazy. It only got direct morning sun, and it was a dish garden. We do a lot of youth project dish gardens, but that's exactly what was happening. So I begrudgingly put a supplemental light on that, and
Right.
they've
Like
done a lot better. Yeah.
This is your annual reminder that if you say that you have a black thumb and you can't grow anything because you've killed a cactus in your house, that is not a good representation of you killing
no.
things because
If you
cactus,
kill yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
are native to desert environments. What is your house? Not a desert. So give yourself some slack
It's
here.
more if you, like, kill, like, a ZZ plant or a peace lily, then your plant
A
care
snake plant.
is yeah, is
I've killed a peace
questionable.
lily, so
We were talking about which I've actually seen spaths, peace lilies, like in terrariums, which is pretty
Mhm.
amazing. But it's one of those aggressively pruned kind of plants. But the exciting thing about dish gardens, I remember 7 years ago, if you went to a box store, you were not going to get a good selection of succulents at your local, big box store. But
Mm.
now it seems like there's
Yeah.
whole kiosk, and I don't know, I don't recall the specific year that happened, but it's been several years that you can go to almost any big department or box store, and now you have a large selection, an amazing selection of, sedums, all of the different
Mhm.
amazing aloes and the echeverias and all the other like string of pearl type plants. You
Mhm.
have this great selection. And when did that become a thing for all the plants that are just perfectly suited for dish gardens? I mean,
Right.
There was a huge boom for houseplants and succulents during COVID.
oh
Mhm.
yeah, I guess that does make
Just like
sense.
there was for a lot of it, like gardening or for sourdough bread baking or
Oh yeah.
other things that I had already been doing because I was
Yep.
already spending a lot of time by
Yes,
myself.
exactly.
All by
I
myself.
was already nerding out about these
Yeah.
things.
I think
Yeah.
one of the this is reminding me of there's just some crossovers to other stuff. There's a ton of YouTube content about Terraria and vivarium, like a
Mhm.
vivarium, Vivaria, which has an animal or something in
Mm.
it. along with an aquarium. So, and there's a whole this whole subset of vivaria, which are considered bioactive enclosures, meaning that they can you actually release these different, some very small insects into the cage as well, like isopods and other kinds of insects that are good at breaking down organic matter, and it kind of helps to even further create that nutrient cycling in addition to the water cycling. It's a whole thing, but there's like all these clickbaity
Very
videos
cool.
that are like, I made this terrarium and sealed it up for 14 years. What happened next shocked me. And it's like, well,
I'm gonna click
I
it.
will
I'm
watch
gonna
watch
this
watch
for
it.
28
Yeah.
minutes.
My friend Cherry, who works at the greenhouse and has taught me a lot of stuff, she gets into, plant nerds always, are all into like the next weird plant thing that they can start doing. And hers has been aquatic plants in like a fish tank. And so it's sort of like that terrarium, but there's something living in there, but these are like fully underwater. And the different plants that is crazy, the plants that can grow fully submerged in water, but they can also grow outside of the water.
Really cool.
And I was like, wait, what? You put what in there? And that has been really cool. And her tanks look really, really nice because there's just live plants down in there hanging out.
Does she have fish in it?
Yeah.
Just for
She's got
some.
one in her office down by the greenhouse, sometimes she takes it home in the winter because it'll get cold in there. But she did have a nice one in her little office, just like a cute little corner tank with little guppies in it. And it was awesome.
But she's like the opposite of, she's like just has the fish in there to feed the plants.
Yeah,
she's
she's
like, you
the
guys can
plant
stay
person.
here.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I guess I
Just
need
as
to add
long
some
as you
fish.
Yeah, that's pretty
That's
cool.
exactly
My
right.
uncle owned a independent pet store that I worked at in most of high school, and we had a bunch of fish and reptiles and stuff. And so we had sold a lot of live plants, and it's it's like a whole separate thing from having fish, a whole separate thing from having our more terrestrial plants. It's pretty cool.
Neat.
So many different ways you can go with this, and I've seen some incredible examples of things. And like you were saying, Alexis, I mean, they take a lot of different forms, and it's amazing how adaptable some plants are. And some of these plants that we're talking about today can be used, we kind of already alluded to it, for dish gardens and terrariums. But I mean, it's amazing some of the scenarios. I've seen terrariums that you'll see them like at a state fair or something, or as you're traveling around, you notice things that there'll be a label on there, a closed system for the last 25 years. And there's this ecological system in a jar, some big, glass container typically, that hasn't been opened up. It's been corked up and no air exchange, and that's amazing to me.
Well, I want to come back to that, but I have just a quick kind of nuts and bolts question. So, as far as the types of plants that you would select to go into a terrarium versus a dish garden, you
Yeah,
kind of have summarized it as moist tropicals versus arid. Arid plants. You have a short list of like names in case someone's looking to get started? Like, here's a couple that you might look at, or things that we've typically included in the dish gardens that we do.
I'm a boring woodland theme guy. I know you can do a desert theme in a terrarium. I've seen those and they're pretty interesting. I'm more of I love moss and ferns. That's my two tops. And some kind of like driftwood kind of thing in there. But I love the wood, anything that looks, woodland themed to me. That's like my two tops is moss and ferns. Do you guys have anything else you work with, Alexis, Jessica?
I really like little small leaf begonias in a terrarium, and because there's a lot of. Remember how I said some of the most successful terrariums have very few species in there. You can get a lot of different begonias that all like the same thing, but all look really different, and so I think that's like. If you can pull something like that off, it can really boost your chances of success. And so I like the small leaf begonias. African violets do well in terrariums. If you're having trouble, for the longest time, I couldn't grow African violets. So I finally have one now that seems to like me. I bought it when I had a bad day several years ago, and I was like, I'm gonna buy a plant.
Because that's what you do. Duh.
That's what you do when you have a bad
You have a
day.
bad day.
If I text Jessica and say, I just bought a plant, she goes, are you okay? Do you need to talk about it?
What's going on?
And I'm like, no, I just bought a plant about it. But so African violets do really well in there. But yeah, or like little English ivies. And that one is going to be the one that's important to make sure you're getting a true dwarf, because it will take over your terrarium very quickly.
I've seen some oxalis that's really good, but it's the dwarfing type of oxalis and beautiful. And it had been in a terrarium for many years. And what is it? Nerve plant? I forget the scientific name, but like the nerve plants and the oxalis, I've seen both of those in terrariums.
Selaginella is there's a kind called resurrection plant. I think a lot of people have heard of, but Selaginella is one that you can pretty much only grow in a terrarium, and so that one can be cool. And not all of them are quote unquote the resurrection plant. Most of them stay green, but they're real soft, real pretty looking. So highly recommend that one if you're going to have a terrarium, because it's pretty much the only way you can have
There's
it.
one with the common name aluminum plant, and I see it in a lot of terrariums, but I don't see it much outside of terrariums.
I'm glad Brett brought up like the nuts and bolts of things, because I think a big question we get about dish gardens versus terrariums too is like the soil, right? Like what do you put in them?
Good point.
So with more experience with dish gardens, usually recommending like a soilless media. Hopefully like you're getting like a sandy, like the cactus one, because like we said, you can grow all sorts of other plants in as a dish garden as well. But most of the time we're seeing, and like Ray mentioned, like the box stores carrying all the different kinds of succulents now, or they are already like pre-selling dish gardens put together.
Yeah.
But having like a sandy, really well drained soil
A lot
is
of
what you're
times
putting
that'll
there.
be sold, won't it, Jessica? Like I noticed that there was actually smaller bags, like 3-pound
Yeah.
bags.
Yeah, you can get
It's
small bags of it.
called succulent and cactus soil. I think it
Yeah.
was how it was labeled.
Yeah.
I don't know the brand or anything, but I thought that was interesting. Like you're saying, it was just available. I was really surprised.
And then, I don't know, Alexis, you might be able to elaborate more on terrariums, because there's a lot of like, do you put in charcoal, right? Like you see that advertised, or does it depend like more on the plant, since, this is just going to be in a closed environment?
Yeah, I've done both with the charcoal versus not, and not really seen much of a difference. I think the traditionalists do not use charcoal. They just make sure that they have well draining media and they water appropriately. So that's really the biggest thing. Charcoal is almost like to hedge your bets in case you mess up, and that's just to absorb any smells. Primarily is what it's for, but it does kind of create a little bit of a drainage layer as well. So I don't think it's 100% necessary, but if it's something like you already had, it's fine to put in as well. And you're just wanting to use just like a normal potting soil for something like that, whatever you would use for
Something
a house
high in
plant.
organic matter kind of thing for
Yeah,
terrariums.
yeah, like a soil-less media. So the biggest thing is like don't go outside and grab soil from your backyard and put it, because that environment is not the same, and that soil will not function the same in your terrarium as it does in your backyard. So soilless media. One thing that I have been doing, even with some of my house plants, but like my succulents, if you can't find a cactus media, and I don't always love a cactus media, some of those 3-pound bags, sometimes they're too barky, like they just have these big chunks of bark in them, which it's like, again, if you're dealing with a lot of these succulents are native to sandy areas, so why do we have pieces of bark in our cactus media? And so I prefer a lot of the time to, if I you can have the sand, but adding more perlite, which is that white substance in your soilless media. Like if you get potting soil, the little white crunchy thing, and I'll add a lot more perlite to just regular potting soil, and that creates those air pockets and that good drainage that we like. So that's just an option to throw out there if you're having issues with like root rot or something.
And have we talked about fertilizer yet? We get that question a lot, Jessica.
Before we move on to that, any other plants for dish gardens that are just kind of on the short list of? I know we said succulents and cactus. Is that or cacti? Is that kind of the gist, or?
Yeah,
There's entire
Any
list, reference list, and really it's a problem of availability to me
Mhm.
because some of these are hard to find,
Yeah.
or hard to find locally. You can order them, but it seems like if you go beyond the normal things that we've just mentioned, there might be some other random ones that you can adapt to, depending on the size of your container, but you're going to have to place some orders.
You can, so yeah, the succulents, so those are like your hens and chicks style of things, any type of succulent, but there are dish gardens that are technically they're dish gardens like you see coming from like a florist shop, where they'll have lots of different flower foliage plants like in one dish. And so like I often think of them more as like a potted plant, but when you've got a
Mhm.
bunch of different ones in there, it's kind of technically a dish garden. And so
Yeah.
those could be any tropical plants that you like. But I think the general scheme, when I say dish garden, I think of like a shallow lipped, you
Yeah.
know, literally like a big, bowl basically
Mhm.
sitting out.
It's like
Uh,
I don't know. It's not a large volume of soil. It's
no, it's
an
real
inch and a
thin,
half, 2 inches, you
short.
even 3 inches. And a lot of times I love, like, I get a little bit more specific when we're talking about dish gardens, to make it more forgiving. That's when I actually like the terracotta, and I will go to the extra
Hmm.
expensive terracotta because that
It
will buffer
breathes.
out the water a little bit better. So I love terracotta dishes, and there's a reason for that. If they're unglazed, they have that nice quality of kind of breathing out some of the water. So for new dish garden growers, that can be a little bit more forgiving. But
Mhm.
I found that locally, the dish garden selection of plants, not talking about terrariums anymore, but just dish gardens, is a great selection almost year round.
Yeah, sedums, hens and chicks,
Yeah.
aloe vera.
And
Uh,
the aloe is really amazing. I mean, don't think of just your standard house aloe. If you go and look, and there's just some that don't even look of this earth, the aloes that are
mhm.
red and spiny, the spined reds and things, and they're all different colors. And it's amazing what they've done with breeding for the aloes in dish gardens. They're
Yeah.
amazing.
Your jades too, that's another one that can
Yeah,
be easy to
curly leaf
find,
jade is
jades.
one that I have growing right now upstairs.
Yeah, even like a Christmas cactus, like a small like if you get a
Yeah.
cutting of a Christmas cactus, they'll do well,
Air
Mhm.
plants. I mean, I use air plants in dish gardens because
Mhm.
they technically don't have to have that soil medium, but you can put them in there as long as you don't overwater them.
yeah.
Yeah, there's so many plants that do pretty well, but it's really important that we just mentioned a bunch of different plants, okay? But not all of them have the same growing requirements, even though they're all suitable for dish gardens.
Mhm.
Curly leaf jade, I was mixing it with my echeveria, but the curly leaf jade took a little bit more moisture.
Mhm.
It could actually go without a lot of moisture, but it basically had a dwarfing effect on it. But to do the best, it needed a little bit more moisture. But the echeveria, I think a good way to kill those is to just water a little bit too much, and
Mhm.
they do
Mhm.
not like that. So check your growing requirements and your moisture requirements. And it was amazing. Once I got my curly leaf jade out, it had basically not grown in 3 to 4 years. I was like, oh, this is so awesome. It's working great for a dish garden. I actually pulled it from a terrarium, put it in a dish garden. But once I pulled it out and I could treat it by itself the way that it needed, it's just tripled in size in 1 year. And it's amazing because
It's
it was not
happy.
doing, yeah, it was happy. So I guess the moral of that story is pay attention to the different requirements of what these things need, because not all succulents, even though that's the most popular grouping of plants for dish
Mhm.
gardens, not all of them have the exact same growing requirements. So make sure to pay attention to that.
Did you want to talk about fertilizer? Because I have a final question after that.
Fertilizer is basically, the moral of that story is not much, even for dish gardens, which takes more fertilizer than a terrarium. Terrariums take little to no fertilizer, from my experience. Either that, or I've just not been successful and
You
had
want things to
terrariums
stay
long enough.
small, so
Yeah,
You're not
and if
encouraging growth there. Yeah.
it's for dish gardens, it's like, for me, I've found a good formula of what, unless I'm using a succulent pre-made fertilizer, and I don't always buy that. I do just a off-the-shelf indoor plant fertilizer at about half strength, maybe once a year when active growth typically takes place during longer days. That is, and I've had good luck with that. And that's meaning I don't fertilize much at all. Uh,
yeah.
Not typically.
Mhm.
And the rule of thumb is, if you do have a dish garden that takes more water, the more you water, the more that's going to wash out the salts and fertilizer in the soil. So adjust your fertilizer schedule accordingly. But overall, they take a lot less fertilizer than typical houseplants because like Alexa said, you want them to stay small. And now that I have fertilized twice a year my little jade plant, and it is going to be a big jade plant someday. So. But
and I think sometimes people, just because of the nature of gardening, and like we're trying to encourage people to take a soil test and then fertilize according to that. And in general, plants aren't going to die if you don't fertilize them, especially in this kind of context. And so, like, if people are worried, oh, if I don't like they think that fertilizer is a thing that plants has to have in order to survive. You'd be pretty surprised. I mean, you'd be pretty surprised how little nutrient is available in the desert. And these things grow slowly. Sometimes we have a patience issue with things growing faster. But yeah, I think that's a really great way of describing it. Well, to reprise my role of the person who asks people, the how-to people, why questions instead of just how questions. Why is it that you think these things are so have such staying power? Why do you think it is that people do that? Because it's, I mean, to be the unimaginative, grumpy uncle, they don't serve any purpose. They don't do anything. You can't eat it. You can't live in it. You can't blah 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 blah. But like, why is it that you think these things? What is it about them that attracts you, or you think it attracts people, or what are you teaching kids with it? What's the deal?
I like tiny things. I like tiny little. I think it started with me with micro machines, Brett, when I was younger. Little tiny Matchbox style cars, but I thought this is so cool. And I asked Reed the same thing, and he one of the things on his wish list last year for Christmas was a tiny Zen garden about the size of a dish garden. He's got a tiny rake that he rakes his patterns in it every week. But and I said, well, why do you enjoy that so much? He says, I don't know. I just like small things, but I like the joy of having the joy and versatility of having a little tiny plant garden next to me, growing. I think it's just one of those bringing one of the four elements in, bringing some of the elements in.
I was going to say, I was just like the joy of growing something, having something green inside. I mean, you can say that about just houseplants in general too, but and I think we've talked a lot about, like, especially dish gardens, the accessibility to them now, like where you can just like buy them already pre-made, ready to go, and then you hope you keep them alive, right? But I think there's the joy and like kind of like, is it fashionable, right? Is that like kind of trendy, like kind of thing, why people like love them so much? You see them used in decoration all the time.
I just saw them in the background of all the influencers, and I thought it must be cool, to have hanging baskets and succulent garden. Yes, exactly.
I come to you for my fashion advice, Jessica. So you should be telling me if it's fashionable or not.
All right. Yes, you might want to rethink that, but thank you, Brett.
Like my outfit, or rethink coming to you?
Okay.
I mean, gotcha. You or just myself in general.
Dish gardens are fun. I don't know why. That's a great question, Brett. And anytime we have a class on dish garden, it tends to be pretty popular. I don't exactly know, but
I think because it's an art form. Like it's a design factor. So like it's living plants. So different from floral design, which are cuts. This is a living plant design. And I think bonsai probably kind of fit in there too, where it's like a living plant that you're creating an artistic style on. And I think terrariums and dish gardens are just almost like another canvas. You're just using live plants and caring for them that way. So like for me, it's like the benefit of having all these live plants, which I obviously love and have a bunch of, but I get to design with them, which is another experience.
Now, when you guys do your dish gardens, I'm going to ask you to tell on yourselves. Do you guys use like fun rocks? Because I've never had a dish garden where you can see any soil. You see little dried fern that I put everywhere. Sometimes some little, petrified or like dried wood.
Yeah.
But mostly just fun aquarium gravel across the top that I've done an underlayment under. And then some fun larger rock. It's all about the rocks for me with terrariums. I'm going to admit it.
Little dinosaurs.
The little tiny dinosaurs. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now,
we're thinking the same thing.
Now we're getting to it, Brett. It's really the accessories that we're after, okay? And when I see those entries at the state fair, I'm always amazed like at some of the themes that I see that are just so creative. Yes, the plants are wonderful, but it's those accessories they put in there. Yeah. Yeah, fun stuff.
We have to share a fun one. Ray was there with it for it. this year with
Hope I
me.
didn't do anything embarrassing.
No, I cannot remember the county, and I wouldn't share it anyways. But we had a dish garden come in. Was it a dish garden terrarium? And we were all like, "Oh my gosh, that is the most beautiful dish garden I've ever seen.
Oh
Those
my
On the
gosh.
plants look
skull?
amazing." And there was like different, yeah, it was like a
The
desert, and
theming
and,
was
and
amazing, yeah.
Ray took it. Like Ray had it in his hands, and we're like, "Wow!" And then we just looked closer, and we're like, "Are those real plants?" And then
No,
Ray
no, they
reached in there
weren't.
and was like, "This is
Nope.
fishing line on this cactus." And they
Yeah.
were completely all fake plants
Yeah,
that were
not
entered, and
real.
that's why it looked so pristine. And
But it was a very
from a
nice display,
distance,
though. From an
Mhm.
artistic perspective,
yes,
people, it was an A plus.
they hit all the
From a
elements from the artistic
biological
wise.
perspective, it was not an A
Yeah.
plus.
From a
It was
distance, we were like, "That is best in show." And then when you got closer,
I'm
this
glad
not
is
we
so
didn't get
much.
yeah.
real.
Well,
Yeah.
I have two theories for why I think these types of things
What do
capture
you
the
have?
imagination or are popular or whatever. I think one of them is, and it makes me wonder how many of these things are started in like the winter
Mm.
because you're just clamoring to grow something and you can grow these inside and it's, gives you something to kind of, I think it allows you to basically in places where there is a winter season to grow year round or take care of things year round, kind of like what Jessica was saying earlier.
Mhm.
My other theory, based on what you all are saying, and based on Ray's love of small things,
All
is that
the
it
small things.
allows us to play in a way that is foreign to like a lot of adult life, where
Mhm.
it's you're adding fun dinosaurs and you're doing these things and it's small and it's almost like that distance from
A little
productivity.
Tamagotchi.
I was
Yeah,
thinking Tamagotchi, yeah. Scale and yeah,
that
Brett, there's
distance from
something there.
productivity, the fact that it's not really in any way
Mhm.
practical is actually what makes it
Mhm.
so powerful. Is that because there's
Mhm.
no pressure, there's
And it's
no
a system, isn't it? I mean, if you're successful and get all that put together, like Brett's saying, it's kind of like this living system kind of thing, and it's so cool.
yeah.
And it's not like it's growing lemons, Alexis, or something tasty or
It could.
productive. But yeah, that's not the point of it, is it? Typically, it's not the point.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
this is making me talking with you all is making me realize that I am a different type of plant person from all of you.
Oh.
Uh,
He's like,
Okay.
What,
we're gonna need to
how
unpack that
so?
a little bit on the next. Yeah.
I have very very little interest in like tropical plants or
Mm.
Ugh.
arid, cactus or it's not like if it's a plant I love it or it intrigues me in the way that seemingly for you all it does. And
You don't buy
that,
plants when you get sad?
that's totally great. I'm a little jealous, to
It's
not
how I
have
got a
that.
new lemon tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you more about the local plants to your zip code, Brett, kind of person,
Not
or what?
necessarily. No, it's not
Oh,
like a fixation on native.
mm.
I think I'm like a hardiness guy more so than a
Ooh, yeah,
native versus
I
Mm.
appreciate
non-native.
some hardiness too.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
But
anyway,
there's a lot to be said about plants that, yeah, go through the seasons and do it in such a way. Sometimes it's known, and sometimes it's a mystery. So,
but maybe I need to try a little dish garden, give it a try, see if it hooks me. But I'm hoping some people out there who have their cabin fever start a dish garden or a terrarium and with the inspiration they've gathered from this episode.
Yeah,
yeah,
and check out the show notes for some additional information, just plant lists, things like that. What to look for, the full checklists that can be super helpful if you've never done one before. Um, or if you just saw like a really cool piece of glass at one of the stores and you're like, that would be cool to put plants in. Do it. You can. I promise you can do it. It's fun and you can put tiny dinosaurs in it. And if that's not a win in life, I don't know what is. So you can find us on social media, on Instagram, specifically at Hort Culture Pod. You can also shoot us an email if you've got any questions, and we've had some come in lately with some great ideas for future episodes. So we'll be working those in when as the season makes sense for us to start talking about that. And so feel free to ask any questions or give us a shout out. You can leave us a review, and that helps other people find us. It makes the algorithm happy, and tell us about what do you like to put in your dish garden or terrarium? Is it tiny dinosaurs? Are you more into, NASCAR's cars or something? I don't know. Whatever you're into, we're not going to judge you for it. As long as you have the appropriate plants paired together, we will judge you for that. And if you have questions, you know how to contact us.
Yeah,
But
if you
we think
have a leggy cactus, we're going to judge you for that too.
Yeah, apparently.
That's going to be the picture
no,
for
you just
this
say
episode.
use it for demonstration purposes, and then everything is fine. Education is key here, people. That's what we're about. So
that's right.
We learn more from our mistakes. Yeah.
Learn from our mistakes. Yeah. Learn from our mistakes so that you don't make them. That's our job. Well, we're glad to have you all here with us today. And we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us and that you'll join us next time. Have a great one.